In the world of manga, it's easy to be absorbed in the countless number of classics, beloved titles, and modern juggernauts. There are so many manga begging to be read, and the majority of people will never dig any deeper than the most popular battle shonen or ultra-violent seinen. To help alleviate that problem, I try to push others to read series that I believe deserve more attention, like Twin Star Exorcist or Space Brothers. With that in mind, I recently set out to find some more underrated manga that not enough people are talking about. Using my anime list as a loose consensus, I decided to limit myself to manga that are currently rated less than an 8 out of 10 and have under 25,000 members. That led me to a few currently ongoing and underrated manga that I want to talk about today. And so with that said, let's jump on in and shine a light on some manga that you might otherwise overlook. First up on my list of underrated manga is one of the best battle shonen currently being published, Demons of the Shadow Realm. You may not know this manga, but you should recognize the art style. That's because you certainly know of its creator, Hiromu Arakawa, and her previous work, Full Metal Alchemist. If you happen to be really cool, then you might also know Silver Spoon, which is arguably just as good as Full Metal. You should need no introduction to Arakawa, who has proven herself to be a legend in the manga industry multiple times over. Demons of the Shadow Realm is simply the latest result of a master doing her thing. In a lot of ways, you could consider this a return to form for Arakawa, after Silver Spoon was both smaller in scale and a complete departure from her battle shonen roots. Although that story is incredible in its own right, it was fundamentally a different kind of manga. She was able to take a step back from battle shonen, learn some new tricks in a totally different genre, and come back with a new toolkit. This story is best left unexplained, as the first chapter takes some bizarre twist, so I won't say too much, only that I'm really enjoying the direction it's been heading. I'm not sure that it will build out a story or world quite as grand as Full Metal Alchemist, but its conflicts are layered and compelling. This is helped by the main characters, Yuru and Asa. Once again, Arakawa has written a story about siblings, but this time they're twins and opposite genders. Their dynamic is very different than that of Ed and Al's, but you can tell that Arakawa writes their relationship with the same tender love as she had over 20 years ago for that story. Overall, the characters, including those in the supporting cast, have every bit of charm that you could expect from her writing. Additionally, I adore demons as a power system, which are basically gods or yokai. Demons sort of fall in line with systems like Nin or Stans, which is a huge positive for me. I absolutely love when characters' abilities, as well as the rules and mechanics of each ability, are highly individualistic to them, and Demons perfectly capitalizes on that. Arakawa already made tons of cool uses of alchemy in Full Metal, but she's really flexing her creativity with all the different abilities she comes up with this time around. It's especially fun because demons come in pairs. Characters will always have a contract with 2 demons, which means there's a lot to work with. One of my favorite parts of this power system is how each demon's ability interacts with their partner's ability. This could be as basic as a set of killer teeth made up of 2 demons, or as complex as a pair of demons that can white out any damage done to their surroundings and then ink over it with the other half, seemingly repairing all damage by using the 2 abilities in tandem. I just have an unfiltered love and appreciation for power systems that get that deep into the weeds with how the abilities work. It's a really sick power system all around, and it only keeps getting better. If you haven't read Demons of the Shadow Realm yet, I would definitely either give it a shot or keep an eye out for the upcoming anime adaptation coming out next year. I suspect when the anime drops, it will see a surge in popularity, and I hope so because it deserves way more attention than it is currently getting. This could be a big hitter eventually, but for now, this remains an underrated gem that I would recommend to nearly every manga fan. Okay, so what if, and bear with me, this is a crazy idea, What if women were allowed to actually fight in manga? Obviously you have Stone Ocean, which has the supremely badass Jolene Cujo, and it seems as though recent battle shonen have been more interested in showcasing strong women, but still, there's this unshakable sense that female characters are not allowed to be as tough as the boys. The reality is, male characters dominate action manga. That's where Star Strike It Rich comes in and annihilates those preconceptions. This is not even a battle shonen to begin with, but instead a manga about building an underground fighting organization with some of the most brutal combat in any manga I have ever read. Everything starts to make sense when you realize this is authored by Jacobo Sandrovich, creator of King and Ashura, an ultra-violent manga about fighting. This is his second collaboration with the artist Mam, after their series How Heavy Are the Dumbbells You Lift, which is more of a comedy ecchi series about girls trying to get in shape. The important takeaway is that Dumbbells may be an ecchi, but it had a major focus on muscular girls, and Star takes that and folds it back into the ultra-violence of King and Ashura. It's very cool to see a manga that shows off women's strength, especially in such a brutal fashion that is historically almost exclusive to men. Rare is it that a manga gives focus to women fighting. Even rarer is it that a manga's entire premise is buff girls beating the utter shit out of each other. Luckily, these fights are also super fun to read. They're often so visceral that you would be lucky to finish a volume without seeing a few broken bones. There's some amount of strategy, but it really depends on who's in the ring. Sometimes it can be pretty limited to who can just brutalize their opponent more. Take the fight between Rico, seemingly the strongest of our core team, and this total psycho woman who has replaced almost all of her bones with titanium. After Rico understands why her attacks aren't doing enough damage, her strategy becomes to hit even harder. It's simple and dumb, but I can't lie. The beatdown is extraordinarily entertaining, even if not strategically satisfying. This manga really is just about building up each new fighter as a more threatening opponent than the last, and then the bloodbath that follows. I also do love that the character designs are, at minimum, lean but muscular, and can otherwise be as ridiculously ripped as any man in Fist of the North Star or any early part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Of course, these characters are not super complex individuals with nuance. What you see is what you get, and that kind of summarizes the entirety of this manga. Admittedly, there isn't a lot of story going on, at least not a story that I particularly care about. There's some subplots about Yakuza rivalries and a larger overarching narrative about a cult which ties into one of the main characters, Hina. She is not only an incredible fighter, she is also one of the 9 so-called star children that will supposedly change the world order, whatever that means. It's an interesting enough backdrop, but I also hope it never takes away from the underground fighting or characters that are not the star children. I also initially worried about Hina, who seems so godly that no one stands a chance against her. However, after getting further into the chapter count, it became obvious that she is not the hero we want to see win. We're actively looking for another girl that can knock her teeth loose. Still, if what you're looking for is muscular girls beating each other into the ground, there are very few manga that are going to satisfy that itch as much as Star Strike It Rich. Have you ever imagined what Jurassic Park would be like if everything went according to plan? Well, Dinosaur Sanctuary, or Dinosaur for short, is exactly that. In this world where dinosaurs have been brought back to life, they exist within zoos and preserves. There's some darker moments, but this is a more grounded, realistic take on dinosaur media. This is not a monster movie where dinosaurs rampage and eat people, but a manga about taking care of dinosaurs as actual living, breathing creatures, and all of the struggles that come along with that. When I say this manga was made for me specifically, I mean it. I grew up watching Jurassic Park on repeat. I constantly played park building games like Zoo Tycoon and Jurassic Park Operation Genesis throughout my childhood. I loved going to zoos and theme parks every chance I got. I have adored dinosaurs and paleontology for the better part of my life. I would still sell half of my organs just to see a real-life dinosaur, even if it meant me collapsing on the ground and dying right after, because I love them that much. This is the one manga to ever perfectly capture those feelings. the excitement of exploring a park filled with dinosaurs. If you can't tell, I'm in love with this manga. Dino-san is legitimately one of my favorite manga of the 2020s, crafted with an undeniable care and endless love for dinosaurs. They are drawn with the intention of recreating an authentic look into what these animals would have been like, and there are entire pages dedicated to discussing the real-world research that has been conducted on each one. It isn't just educational either, so it never feels like a slog to get through. Each dinosaur is fun to meet and even more fun to get to know, with each one having a unique and colorful personality. The story usually revolves around an arising problem for one of our dinosaur buddies that has to be solved by the human characters, who are basically zookeepers that take care of these prehistoric giants. What I love so much about that is that regardless of the problem, the dinosaurs are never portrayed as movie monsters. They genuinely feel like real animals. They can be scary, cute, or even boring. They can succumb to sickness or develop behavioral issues. They can be difficult to understand, but equally rewarding to work with. Even when their dangerous side is being explored, they are treated as any other animal would be. Hell, they even make dinosaur nuggets out of them, and that's the most realistic outcome of bringing dinosaurs back to life. I feel like any further recommendation is kinda pointless. I think most people will either be sold by the premise alone, or they won't care because dinosaurs, animal keeping, or non-battle manga are not interesting to them. I would recommend Dino-san to anyone that likes animal documentaries or visiting the zoo, and specifically to people who think dinosaurs are cool for more than their flesh-shredding teeth. With that said, I do hope that more people read Dino-san because it's the least popular of the manga I'm talking about today. As a sort of bonus recommendation, I want to give a quick shout out to Her Night from Another World, my girlfriend's webcomic. I just wanted to mention it in this specific video because the entire purpose of me recommending underrated manga is to shine a light on stories that I believe deserve more attention. And as biased as I may be, this is the exact kind of story that I would want to push others to go read. The story is about 20 episodes deep at this point, so there's a good bit of content to dig into, but we're still definitely early days in the grand scheme of the story. But still, I think her character art has gotten really good, the mysteries that she's building out are interesting, and more importantly, the character dynamics are really likable. In specific, I absolutely love the character Erin. I think she's just the absolute cutest, both in design and personality. This is a very character-driven story, but it's kind of got a little bit of everything. It's got some action, it's got some romance, it's got some mystery, so if that all sounds interesting to you, please go check out Her Night from Another World. Of all the manga I'll be recommending today, the newest title is Centuria. This is a dark fantasy manga that's currently building in popularity, so it might not be underrated for long, but I want to be a part of what pushes it to the next level. It's still early days for this series, having only started publication in April of 2024, but it has impressed me in almost every regard. Its artwork is great, especially when it comes to the fantasy elements. The monsters are awesome, and the world is brought to life with a dark sensibility. The bold line art, striking use of black ink, and Lovecraftian design work are all really great. With more time, I could see Toru Koromori becoming a master of his craft. This is his first serialized work after all. Of course, being a dark fantasy, you can expect Centuria to have a punishing world. While that is indeed the case, it's the contrast between the darkness of its world and its positive messages that won me over. Its protagonist, Julian, is a former slave who, after some terrible misfortune, has obtained newfound powers. More importantly, he takes on the responsibility of a newborn baby, who was born on the same ship he had been on. That's where the real story and emotional core of Centuria is. Julian's dedication to raising this baby as a little sister and doing everything he can to give her a happy life. As the two make connections with a small community of villagers and they build a found family, the harsh reality of this world makes it harder to live in peace. However, despite all the darkness that seeps out of this world, the innate goodness of people always finds its way into every crevice of this story. Nothing makes me more emotionally invested in dark stories than showing how, regardless of how bad it gets, people can still be good to each other. There's nothing inherently wrong with suffering being the driving force of a story, but I tend to not get as invested in those kinds of stories. There's a real, gentle warmness at the core of Centuria that makes me really attached to these characters, which is vital in making the story's darkest moments hit far harder than they otherwise would have if the story was a constant downer. Well, that's a wrap on all the manga recommendations I have for you today. If you happen to check out any of these series, please let me know what you think of them, and if you have any of your own favorite hidden gems, feel free to share them in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll give them a read and they'll find their way into my next recommendation video.